The Last of Us on HBO is proof that you can have video game adaptations that not only just follow the source material, but still keep it fresh and inventive.
Hello and welcome to the movie podcast review of The Last of Us series on HBO. My name is Daniel. I am one of your hosts today, and joining alongside me are our fellow clickers. Anthony.
Hello. Click, 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 click. Click, click, click.
What are you?
Shahbaz.
Is that a pen in your hand? What is that?
No, I think he was just clicking a pen.
So when I'm a clicker, I use my hands. I'm not even infected, and I just.
Oh, you're like a crab, basically. Okay.
I'm just a dude. I'm just a guy in this world that's just saying click, 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 click.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. He's setting everyone up. Shahbaz is also joining us.
Hi, I'm more of a friendly clicker. I'm not here to actually bite or do anything like that. I'm just here to have a good time, see how the party goes.
Okay, that's very it's very kind of you. I like that. And joining us for the very first time on the movie podcast, making their debut, is Brad Shankar of MobileSyrup. Hello, Brad. How are you?
Hello, I am great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, we've been dying to have you join us on the movie podcast for so long. So we are honored to have you talk about the Last of Us series of all things. This has been something that, I think we've been waiting for the better part of a decade, from when it was a film to it was announced being a series, and now finally coming out into the world. This is fantastic. And we could think of no one else better to join us on this episode today. So thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who do not know Brad's work, Brad, please introduce yourself. Tell us what you're all about, what you've been working on. And, you got to do a really cool junkets right before the holidays. So please tell us all about that experience as well, too. I won't give it away.
Yeah, so I'm Brad Shankar, one of two Brads at MobileSyrup, Canada's leading tech publication. I'm the gaming editor, so I do most of the gaming stuff, but I've always done streaming content as well, and I still do that regularly. I do a Streaming in Canada column every week. So The Last of Us is kind of a good, mix of both worlds because it's streaming and gaming related. So it was kind of a perfect thing for me to kind of be interested in. And then to your point about the junket, I've never done a junket before. Like I interview game developers mostly, just like a one-on-one sort of thing. But no, I was invited from Crave to go a virtual junket for the Last of Us show with Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, who are the creators and showrunners, and then some of the cast: Pedro Pascal, Ramsey, Gabriel Luna, and Merle Dandridge, which was awesome. That was a virtual thing, so that was really cool. It was a group interview. I believe it was through people all around the world. I was repping Canada, which was really cool, and yeah, just a bit starstruck doing that, to be honest. But that was a really great experience. They talked about filming the show in Alberta, which is really cool because they were there for a year. So they got to see all the sorts of weather. Pedro shouted out fudge and Canmore, which was pretty cool. It was a great experience.
That's fantastic. And, we're going to include links to all of your socials and to that article in our show notes below so everyone could check out all the amazing work that you are doing with MobileSyrup. We are big fans of the site here on the movie podcast. So thank you very much for that. I just want to ask you all, it's been a long journey to the show, like we've been saying. It's been, almost a decade that we've been waiting to see a live action adaptation of this project, of The Last of Us. The Last of Us also being one of probably the most renowned and beloved games in the last year. Shay, for yourself, what's it been like for you to now see the show coming out within a week? Where's your mindset at right now?
I'm still kind of processing it. I feel like it's not real, even though I've seen the first episode a couple of times now, and I still can't believe that I've watched it. The Last of Us is my favorite video game of all time. It's one of my favorite stories, my favorite characters. So, back in whatever year it was, I think like 2012, when we were getting that news about, the movie coming out. And then, what was it, 2012? No. What year was that?
Well, I guess it would be 2013, 2014, right?
Yeah.
It was 2013. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Because I was in the past for some reason. I don't know why. But anyways, when that news came out, I was super excited. But I'm like, oh, how are they going to make this into a movie? There's so much story to tell. So for us to kind of get this series, it still kind of got me by surprise. I can't wait for people to see it. I am nervous though for when it comes out, because like with anything video games, like with anything that's so beloved, there's going to be so much discourse on the internet, and I'm praying that I avoid it. I'm praying that people avoid it and just kind of go into it. And The Last of Us itself has kind of gone through its its turmoils as well with the last game that came out. So I'm praying that people listen to this review only, no other review. That's it, just ours.
Not even Brad's review.
No. Brad's counts. This is an extension. Brad, your review on MobileSyrup, because I'm sure it'll be glowing, and then just kind of go into the show. And everything else, tune it out.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting way to go into this. Anthony, how about you? Where's your head at right now, knowing that we are finally getting a series of The Last of Us releasing into the world?
Finally, we've got to the point where it's live action. It's here. I think for me, I'm excited just to see where other people who haven't played the game, who haven't experienced it on these consoles, to actually experience it live action, and getting, the different demographics who would probably never play the games, like the older crew, the older crowd, that probably wouldn't own a PlayStation 5, but they'll probably watch an HBO series and,
Right.
get them excited about Last of Us. It is, we're in this time period, and we were talking about, Daniel, like the idea of zombies and where that was 10 years ago to now. How does it play? Are people still excited for that genre of storyline? So I'm just wondering, I hope people really embrace it, just like we've embraced it in the game world, that this sticks around for the next season and for many, many years to come.
Yeah, that's so true, Anthony. We spoke about that a couple weeks ago, because when we think about the worlds when The Last of Us first released in 2013, you look at kind of where zombie culture was within pulp culture, and we had like The Walking Dead, we had a lot of games coming out, there was a lot of shows and films that were reflecting that kind of, area of pop culture, and we've kind of moved on a little bit from it, but The Last of Us has still stayed ever present, and it's amazing that a series that is now going on 10 years old is still so beloved, only with really 2 games in it. And hopefully we'll have more within the series very, very soon with factions, and hopefully part 3, if that ever does get officially announced, hopefully soon. But it's amazing, honestly, it's so nice that we're finally able to talk about the show. We will be focusing on the first episode only. We will be staying spoiler free as well too, so no worries if this is your first time hearing about The Last of Us. We will not be spoiling anything plot related within the show. We'll be talking more about the characters, how this adaptation kind of holds up to the game, but we will be keeping it spoiler free, because just like what Anthony said, this show is being opened up now to such a bigger audience, audiences who don't have a PlayStation, who maybe don't game. I remember playing the first Last of Us, and my dad was watching like the opening scene with me, and this is something that I wanted him to experience, but I know he won't sit there and play
You're
it with
a horrible
me, or
person.
he won't play it, or he won't play it himself, right? But now he gets to, experience what I've been, loving for all these years, right? So it's been, this is pretty awesome. As always, you can catch a brand new episode of the Movie Podcast every single Monday. We will be back next week with our top films of 2022, so stay tuned for that. And of course, make sure you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Letterboxd at the Movie Podcast. We have lots of great videos and posts out now for you to check out. Shay, what's going on in the Discord world?
The Discord world is popping as usual. Right now, we're talking about what are some of your favorite films from last year. As we're gearing up towards our episode, it's kind of good to know what everyone else was feeling, and we've got some great answers going in so far. So if you want to go ahead and share what you loved about last year's movies, because 2022, as we've said on this show many times, was a phenomenal year for films, let us know. Like, there is no answer that we will not accept. Even Morbius. If you loved Morbius, why not? Hey, there are fans of that movie. Clearly, Sony had to release it twice, so why not? There probably are fans, right?
There's no judgment here. There is no judgment on the Movie Podcast.
None.
We accept all.
Absolutely.
We accept all. Also, of course, if you are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. YouTube.com/the Movie Podcast. That is the place to go. If you want to see all of our lovely faces, please head over to YouTube right now. So The Last of Us series on HBO, this is going to be releasing on HBO Max. It's going to be releasing here in Canada on Crave, so please feel free to watch it on that as well too if you are here in Canada. And it's going to be releasing on January 15th at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So if you are that's the time you want to watch it. That's the time you could watch it or start streaming it. And there will be new episodes weekly. And of course, this series stars Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey, Gabriel Luna, Nick Offerman, Anna Torv, Nico Parker, Merle Dandridge, and Jeffrey Pierce, along with that's a huge cast. It's 9 episodes, so there's lots to talk about. But again, today we are only focusing on episode 1, spoiler free. I'm going to get Anthony to read off a synopsis, then we're going to kick it to Shay for his first reaction, and then we're just going to get this conversation going. So Anthony, please take it away.
Taking place 20 years after modern civilization has been destroyed, Joel, a hardened survivor, is hired to smuggle Ellie, a 14-year-old girl, out of an oppressive quarantine zone. What starts as a small job soon becomes a brutal, heartbreaking journey, as they both must traverse the U.S. and depend on each other for survival.
Thank you very much. So like we said, this is going to be spoiler free. We will be giving our thoughts on, the characters and the adaptation and, the world itself, but we won't be giving any major plot points away. Of course, if you do want spoilers for the show, there's a great game that came out 10 years ago that you're more than welcome to go look it up. But Shay, please start us off with your first reactions to The Last of Us on HBO.
The Last of Us on HBO is proof that you can have video game adaptations that not only just follow the source material, but still keep it fresh and inventive. And I think what I loved so much about this first episode was that you're kind of seeing it from the lens of someone like myself who's loved the game, who's played the game, but is still in wonderment, is still getting surprised, is still understanding that there's more to the story than we're told. That opening cutscene we've played in the game isn't too long. Maybe like you can get through it in just under an hour, probably like 30 minutes if anything. And then in this game, you're seeing it so much more stretched out, so much more fulfilled, that you're seeing all the beauty that Neil Druckmann and the entire writing team, including Craig Mazin, have kind of worked on. There's so much to the story that we don't know. And what I loved about it is that I just kept feeling like I was in suspense. I kept seeing the new changes that they've done. For example, taking this fungal virus and kind of doing the whole mouth cordyceps tingly tangly things that they're doing, like octopuses.
Tingly tangly things.
That's what I want to call it. But it's just creepy. It's just weird, and it had me on edge. There's a lot of great subtle things that they do. The introduction to all the characters is also so beautiful. I mean, when you're introduced to Ellie, it's really just kind of happens. You're just, next thing you know, Ellie's on screen, and you just got to get thrown into it. So I love this. I love this show. I love what we're seeing so far. And I love that we have something that's video game based that everyone can be proud of.
Definitely. Brad, please jump on in. You are our special guest today. Take over the show. The show's yours. Let us know what your thoughts are, and we will jump in when you want to give us a chance to.
Sure, thanks. I agree with everything Shay said. Just for a bit of context, admittedly, and I'll get into this in my own written piece as well, but I was a little down on the show just when it was announced, just in the sense that having played the game from the perspective, obviously, of someone who's played the game, not anyone who's a newcomer, but, we've had that story released 3 times now, basically, originally in 2013, then there was a remaster the following year, and then we got a remake last year. So I was kind of the mind that I wanted a new story, new characters. I didn't really want that rehashed, especially because PlayStation, there's been a lot of things about they're kind of avoiding risks and kind of going after big blockbusters. And, rather than offer any sort of old classic games, they're kind of just focusing on the modern hits, basically. So initially I was a little, do we really need this? But, after watching it, I'm happy to say I'm wrong. I think what they did really well with this show is expand on everything that's in the original game. Because for me, the trailers really leaned into, this is basically the game. Again, it was line for line, shot for shot. They even played the country song. I forget what it's called. And then in one of the other trailers, they played Take On Me, which is from the second game. So it was very clearly oh, this is the game. But I feel that actually does a disservice to the show, because they do they expand a lot of things. It's fundamentally the same story. They don't really drastically change anything, but they just expand on everything. So it actually reminds me in a lot of ways of, for video game fans, my favorite game is Final Fantasy VII, and there was a remake of that. And that was basically the whole premise of that. That's just take everything from the original game and just greatly expand on it. And I feel like that's a really good comparison for The Last of Us show. You get a lot more time with characters, people who were maybe not in it much at all. They get a lot more scenes. one thing that Neil Druckmann has said, who worked on the original game, he was the co-director and writer of the original game, and he's, one of the showrunners of this show. He has said, games, especially the original game, was kind of limited to the perspective of Joel and Ellie, and you don't really see anyone else's perspective other than from their perspective. They're talking to this character, they're talking to this character, but the show can kind of play around with the format and, come away from them every once in a while. We can see, without getting into spoilers, how is this infection affecting the larger world? There's a few clips and trailers where you see like scientists and everything. So it's kind of interesting. You see the outbreak from the perspective of different people other than Joel and Ellie. So I feel like stuff like that is a really cool way of sort of expanding the world that I didn't really expect going in. And it, as to your point, seeing characters and stories that you've loved for so long kind of reinterpreted, reimagined in this way is really interesting and really cool.
Yeah,
So.
I love that. And I think that's where I'm at with it too. This isn't just an adaptation. This is really an expansion of The Last of Us. So there's so much that we know from the games, but what's really cool with this series that we're able to explore in these 9 episodes, obviously we're sticking to the first episode today, is that we can take time away from Joel and Ellie. But Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey, I think they really embody everything that make Joel and Ellie so special. They are fantastic, especially together. But I think where this show is really strong as well is in the world that it's creating. There's a world building that's going on here that it makes me be like, man, I want to have more seasons of the show to explore more of these characters, more of these factions, more what's going on within the world. Because like you said, Brad, we do have moments where we're like, oh, like this is kind of what's going on somewhere else. And we learn more a little bit about the outbreak. And, one of the major changes too from the game is the year that the game is taking place in versus where the show is taking place in, right? So in the show, it starts in 2003 and then we cut to 2023. Where in the game, it's 2013 and it jumps to 20 years. So
I think,
yeah, so like it's definitely a different time period that it's also taking place in.
All I know is
But
that
it's really cool to
Dido's
see
White
that.
Flag was playing in that opening sequence, and I was like, that is how you timestamp what year this is.
100%, that is how you timestamp something. But please, Anthony, jump on in with your first reaction.
I was super curious going into it how this series would be different from the game. That was my biggest worry. What are they going to give me that I haven't experienced in the game? Because I think the game is a cinematic masterpiece. Performance-wise, just the action sequences, the story, everything. It's like, how do you make this live action better than the game? And truthfully, the performances by Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey and just the rawness and how real and powerful they are together. It's so different because we watch them as digital characters, but now we are seeing them as real people, and it's a different feeling you get from them. It's a different, element that you gain from their experience through this world that they have to live in. And it captures everything that we love about the game. That's another beautiful part about this series is they really focus on building these environments that look just like the video game. You have cars with weeds coming out of it. You have the buildings that are crumbling. You
That's just
capture
Alberta, though, Anthony.
I don't even think Alberta has that many buildings, to tell you the truth. But it is the amount of work that went into it, and I know Weta was a big part of creating the digital landscape of the Last of Us series. They did a fantastic job. One thing that I really enjoyed, and we were talking about 2000s, they really captured the 2000s. Like over sepia feeling. It felt like like that opening sequence, learning about the characters and Joel and his daughter and so on. It just felt like this was captured in 2000s. I don't know if you got that feeling. It just felt like, okay,
Definitely
this is
did.
overexposed
Absolutely.
sky, brownish type of color tones that are added to it. So they really captured 2000s. And then when they jumped to 2000 and I guess 2023, it's a different feeling. But, all in all, this is something that I think a lot of people will enjoy. Like for me, I love the series. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic, and the performances are exceptional. But I think a lot of people who will watch this for the first time will be super excited where the story goes, because they are not going to experience it like we have, or they're going to experience it more of a live action sequence feeling. So it's just going to be a different approach to them. And that's where I'm kind of like, hey, man, even though I still love the game more than the series, and I'll be honest, I still think that is, the pedigree of this franchise. I think a lot of people will enjoy this, and a lot of people will take this series and become in love with it and want more. And I can't wait to see where it goes from there.
And it's interesting because we may have people who watch the show and then be like, hey, you know what? I want to play the games now, or I want to experience the games now because this is my introduction to The Last of Us, right? So I think that's really interesting on how things could be introduced to people, right? And I think what this series does so well is that it takes the subject matter seriously. And I think, we've all lived through, all of the incredible video game adaptations that we've had. But when you have something like that was me being sarcastic, by the way, guys. We haven't had a lot.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. But when you have something like The Last of Us and you have Neil Druckmann attached to it, I think it lends itself a little bit of, like, hey, we're taking this seriously. We have Craig Mazin, who obviously worked on Chernobyl, which you have two shows that kind of deal with, not listening to science, which is very interesting. But Chernobyl dropped in 2019 or 2020, and then that really had the world hooked. And I think there was no better creator to also bring The Last of Us to the screen, because there you could see the DNA in both of these shows. And The Last of Us, I think, feels so at home at HBO, and this is what I'm really happy that PlayStation is doing, is that they're picking their creative partners, I think, very strategically. Where we have God of War on Amazon, and we have Horizon on Netflix, and we have all these different shows at different studios, so they could all flourish, because PlayStation knows that in order for us to sustain as a brand, we need to not just be in the gaming world, we need to be multimedia, we need to be everywhere. Shay.
What I loved about this, everything you said was correct, obviously, but what I loved about the beginning of this first episode, especially, was this had only I realized on a couple of rewatches of the first episode, was just the amount of foreshadowing that they're kind of doing. There's moments, for example, where Sarah's in class and there's a kid who's just kind of twitching a little bit, and I didn't think too much of it. I'm like, oh, kids are anxious. That's what high school's like.
Kids be twitching,
Kids be twitching nowadays, And I'm like, oh, there's that buildup. Maybe he's infected. Maybe he's just starting to kind of feel it.
Yeah.
And then obviously, you get to the scene where she's with the old lady who lives beside her, and that scene just had me just sweating like crazy, because I didn't know what was going to happen. I'm like, is this where we're going to start the show? But overall, then you kind of then move over to when the actual, I guess, destruction of everything kind of goes down, and then you have that sequence where they're driving in the car and all these planes are kind of crashing. Like, you see the budget of the show right away, that they have spared no expense. You can intercut John Hammond saying that here if you like.
Yeah.
And then literally all these planes are just coming down and crashing, and it opens up this amazing set piece, and it just keeps going further and further. And Anthony, to your point, they've done a phenomenal job of designing this world to look like a post-apocalyptic 2023 after this cordyceps virus, because everything is exactly like it is in the game. You're seeing so much attention to detail, and I'm so glad that part of it is alive. I even love that we get some more of the backstory on Tess and how she got beaten up, because our first introduction to Tess in the game is, she's been injured, and she's like, oh yeah, this couple of kids got a couple of good hits on me. And we see that. We see the couple of kids. We see the hits. We see all of that. We see the Robert confrontation. And then again, Brad, to your point, what Neil Druckmann is saying is that we're able to now tell different perspectives. And that's what I love so much about this.
Definitely. Anthony, yeah.
Yeah. No,
oh, please, Brad. I'll get Brad and then we'll get Anthony.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, I was just going to say, to add to that, we mentioned how Neil is involved, but I think you can't really understate how crucial that is, because, it's so rare for these video game adaptations, to your point about so many of them being bad. It's so rare to have them involved. Right. Like, even with the Uncharted movie, they had one video where he talked with Tom Holland. He's obviously not going to criticize the show, the movie, but he obviously wasn't involved with it either, right? And sometimes you might get them paying lip service like that. Even I think Capcom with the Sony Monster Hunter movie, they had one of the producers give their blessing to it. But it's how much do they were they really involved, right? But this is like one of the only times where you actually have the original creator heavily involved. And like even when I was speaking to him, to Neil, he was saying like, when he was on set in Alberta, because he was like a consultant in a lot of ways, like people would come on and be like, oh, this is Joel's watch, this is Ellie's switchblade, what is does this feel authentic? And then he's in Joel's house and he's getting all emotional on how accurate it is. But the fact that they involve him and they care to hear what he has to say, and even if he had to go back to Naughty Dog, he was still doing a lot of calls with them and everything. So just that attention to detail, that care to get things right. And just, again, to your point about Craig as well, I think that they're such a great pairing because Neil even admitted, trying to get this movie, first of all, movie made before it became a TV show, he was dealing with so many like Hollywood types that just didn't understand it and like wanted to turn it into like a really like action-packed thing,
I think
or
is
a really
what the
like
term we were seeing this week, right?
Yeah, make it sexy. Yeah. So him meeting Craig, who is a big fan of the game, but also someone who knows the ins and outs of Hollywood. It's like a perfect collaboration there, where Neil can kind of stay true to the spirit. Craig is a fan of it, but he also knows he's a proven screenwriter. He's an award-winning screenwriter, so the two of them can kind of work hand in hand to keep everything faithful, but also kind of expand on it, adapt it for the screen. And one other thing that Neil was mentioning that I thought was really cool, you mentioned the set piece, which was great in the first episode. What I like is that the pacing overall is really interesting and really different because, Neil has mentioned it's not a game. So the need for like action set pieces that you would need in a game, because it's interactive and you're the one on the controller, you don't need those as much. So they kind of fill those scenes more with just a lot of beautiful cinematography or a lot of just like extra scenes of characters just talking. And so I feel like that makes the inevitable set pieces feel a lot more impactful because they don't happen too often. Like it's not like, oh, you kind of become desensitized if Joel's like fighting a clicker or an infected like every 5 minutes. You would feel kind of bored about that. But they use it they kind of ramp up the tension and they use it very sparingly. And I feel like that really adds to the whole atmosphere and vibe.
That's a great point. Anthony, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that it's not really focusing on that action that we've embraced and we've loved from the game. It's really these characters that are driving the story, and that's where I really kind of like see it in a different way compared to how we embraced it as a player who was able to move this character. We actually are seeing more of a human tone to everything that's happening in this world, and that's kind of like where I'm at with episode 1. There are tragic events that happen, and there are moments where you're crying, and then there are moments of like you're laughing, and your moments of like, wow, this is pretty intense. These like that plane sequence, there was like 7 friggin' planes coming down. I'm like, how are they all infected on this plane? They're like every single plane was.
How many planes are landing here right now?
All in this little town in Texas. But yeah, it's the humanness that the story really brings out that we.
Yep.
I guess you don't get it. I felt like I was disconnected in the game because they're digital characters, so the impact wasn't as much of a impact than actually seeing real people do it.
Right.
I know that sounds funny, but it feels different when there's Pedro Pascal is telling his daughter, let's go, and you can see it in his face and his mannerism. Those are things that you can capture in a video game, but you can't really capture all the little mannerisms like in real life. And I think that's where that story and those little things really make this series in the long run going to last of us.
And that was good. I like that. Every moment matters, right? And I think when we are playing the game, it's that thing where it's like, oh yeah, you could kill a bunch of infected, you could kill a bunch of human characters. You're not really thinking that as much, but when you see it done in a cutscene, you feel it more because you're like, oh wow, they just killed somebody, even though I just finished killing 17 people on the way to kill this one person. And that's always one of those things that video games have always had a little bit of a disconnect, right? Where it's like killing someone in a video game when it's in a cutscene, you're like, oh, we're killing this person and it's going to be impactful, but I just killed so many people on the way to you. So it's like, is that weird balance? But yeah, every moment matters. Every moment with the infected matters. Every moment of violence matters in the series. Shay?
There's a couple of things I wanted to touch on. And one of the things that you guys brought up here is we talk about the lack of action, and I'm using air quotes when I kind of say that. And I absolutely, the first time I watched the episode, I was like, oh my god, I love this, man, but I wish there were more, clicker moments or more infected
When do
moments.
we get to take over and start controlling them?
Why am I holding my controller still? What's going on? And then upon a rewatch, I was like, you know what? No, I'm kind of glad that we're not getting this consistent, like we're like barely seeing that many, really. Like it's more about the element of the characters, the emotions of these characters, and I absolutely love that. And to even talk about how this show starts, like the opening sequence taking place, I believe it's the 70s, I think, right? Or
60s.
68,
60s, right?
1968.
Yeah, so yeah, late 60s, and I loved that. I'm like, wow, again, we're getting different perspectives. We're really building out this world. We're seeing where this all starts from, and it all feels believable. But what I really wanted to kind of ask you guys was, from what I remember reading, and I could be wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, that Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey really hadn't played the game. They were kind of told to bring their own characteristics to these characters, and these are characters, again, that people are so in love with. And I think while that could be a controversial decision, I wanted to know, opening up to, let's start with Daniel, what did you think about that? Like, how did you feel seeing the performances? Did you feel like, okay, yeah, I'm glad that they didn't play the game, or oh man, I kind of wish they did play the game because I wanted that kind of nuance to the character?
It's interesting because, when we hear this sometimes, or we hear this often when it comes to some video adaptation, where it's like, oh, Assassin's Creed, yeah, we didn't play the games, or with the Halo series, yeah, we didn't.
It all takes place in the present.
You know what I mean?
First red flag.
Gosh. But yeah, you see that a lot, and then I think Bella Ramsey actually said, yeah, I watched someone like a playthrough of it before we started shooting. But I think what makes me okay, like, instantly who Joel is, instantly who Ellie is. And I think that's what's so special about Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey's performance in this, is that they carry that DNA with them into the show. Like, instantly who they are. You see their mannerisms. You see you see the looks that they give. And I think that's something that, one, because you have someone like Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, who are obviously the most familiar with the game, and Neil being one of the creators. But you just have great actors performing and, bringing to life these characters off the script for them. We're kind of coming in with our own baggage, knowing that, yeah, we've known these characters for 10 years now, almost 10 years. We know how they should act. We know how they act. We know how they move, how they think. But I think what Pedro especially, I think, was so fantastic, seeing, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on their name right now, who she also does Marlene. It's Dandridge.
Merle
Yes,
Dandridge.
who, is Marlene in the video game, but also she's playing the live action Marlene, which is really cool. We get to see a lot more of her, which is really, really cool too. And I think there's no doubting who these characters are. It's not like these are wilds, like, oh, they decided to adapt this very differently. No, like, these are true to who these characters are in the games. Yes, we're going to go on some detours. Things are not going to be always what we know from the games, but that also makes the watch for us who are so familiar with the games, I think, more interesting, because if we know how things are going to happen beat for beat, it won't be as interesting to watch, right?
Absolutely.
But I think Pedro and Bella especially nailed it.
Yeah, Brad, what about yourself?
Yeah, I agree with everything Daniel said. For me, I kind of view it just like it's not really any different than just seeing a different interpretation of your favorite character. Like, how many Spider-Man have we had? How many Batman have we had? And in the same way that a lot of them bring something fresh to the table, but they all kind of capture the same spirit of those characters. That's how I felt with Bella and Pedro. Like, they don't feel like they're doing an impression of Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson from the games, but their performances do still have that kind of, they're very spiritually similar. Like they capture the ethos of those characters. Like, even for me, like, that's like one of the highlights of the show. Just like as soon as you were talking about the intro to Ellie, like as soon as, like, she's in this room, just like in the quarantine zone, and some adults coming to talk to her, and she just, the attitude that she gives them, I'm like, that's Ellie. And maybe some of the lines she's saying are a little different from the game, but it's that spirit, that, spunky spirit, rebelliousness of Ellie. And then, later on, when you get to see her kind of out of that element, the sort of wide-eyed earnestness of Ellie as well. Again, so even if she's maybe not saying the exact same things as the game, that idea, that sense of wow, I'm this young teenage girl, seeing the world for the first time. She captures that so perfectly. And yeah, that was honestly one of the highlights of the show, just seeing these two really good actors who have this really good bond with one another. Like, even when I spoke to them, they have such a cute back and forth. Like, he's very much like an uncle to her. Like, even reading the press, like, because he knew he was going to be spending a year with her, like he set up a rapport with her parents first just to make sure that they're okay with him, because that could be kind of iffy territory in some situations, but they kind of set up a very nice relationships, and then they're just really close with one another, and you feel that in the performances. Like, you really get the sense that obviously at first they start off kind of antagonistic with one another, but you definitely sense that they're kind of
I
like
do love
kindred
that you
spirits
said
as
that. I
well.
mean, I wish everyone had that kind of mentality going into an adaptation of something where it doesn't have to be exactly what
Mhm.
preceded it before. And you know what? I think one of the things that you kind of touch upon there is that we need to protect Pedro Pascal at any cost. He's
Protect
amazing.
Zaddy for
He's
sure.
amazing.
Protect him. Anthony, what
I
about
love that
yourself? What
man.
did you think about their performances in terms of in comparison, or did that upset you?
Well, if I were to close my eyes, they sound like the characters. Like, it just felt like, okay, these two are, Joel and Ellie. Their chemistry, like in the game, is very similar or like the game is very similar. They might not look like the characters that we envision from the game. Joel might not be gruffy gruffy, scruffy, and have like the same
Gruffy and scruffy.
like look, but it's Joel. And same with Ellie. She doesn't look like Ellie, but when you close your eyes and you hear her voice and you hear and the mannerisms, and you once you go through the series, you will at the end of it, it is those are the two characters, and they create their own versions of these two video game icons. So you know for all those who are gonna have probably oh, that's not Joel, that's not, you know what do you don't watch the show, because it's never you're never gonna be happy. Like, if that's the
It's
biggest
true.
thing. And the craziness is it's Neil, I guess Neil being there, it is so honest to the game from beginning to end. Like, it's so honest. There are scenes where you're gonna say, that's that scene from that part in that game, and it's gonna be right on the nose, and you're gonna enjoy it. And their performances are spectacular.
Brad.
I was just going to add, uh, what part of what I like about getting fresh blood in there, and we get to see new takes on these performances, because every actor brings something different to the table, and that kind of shapes their interpretation. Like, speaking when I did my interview, not to keep
No, please take
self
it away.
promoting, but I spoke to Gabriel Luna, who plays Tommy, Joel's brother, and he totally unprovoked. Like, I just asked him, because he was a fan of the games actually before, they even gave him a PS5 so he could replay them, and so he was a fan of them. But so I kind of asked him about that, and he was just saying for him, he was someone who really Tommy really resonates with him because he kind of had a similar relationship with his brother, and his he kind of had to be like an older brother, surrogate father type to his family because his dad passed away at a very young age, and it was just kind of him helping out his mom. So he really related to Tommy as a character, and I feel like that's a very interesting, and that's something different than maybe Jeffrey Pierce, who played him in the game, would bring, because he obviously has different life experiences. So I feel like stuff like that is just because that's something I never even thought of. Like, when he's talking about how Joel is in a way kind of like taking on like a fatherly relationship with Tommy being the younger brother and all of that. Like, that's something I never really thought of. But when he kind of articulated that way, and he's bringing his own background, his own experiences, his life story into that performance, I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. And you even feel that at the beginning in the early scenes where you get to see more of him with Joel before everything goes to hell. Him and Sarah are kind of making fun of Joel because he's old, with his birthday and everything. And again, that's just stuff that obviously he's drawing from his brotherly experiences.
Shows, yeah, I know the show is very
Mhm.
expensive to make. It's true, but like when you have a video games that take 5 and 6 and 7 years to to be released, there's so much the store room for telling these stories, and I really hope that I don't, not that I want them to Walking Dead this series where it's like let's have a bunch of spin-offs, but I think you can over the next few seasons, however you want, start exploring these other factions, exploring the Seraphites from from the part 2, or exploring the wolves, or like there's so many different roads within this world that you could start telling stories in, and you don't necessarily have to stay in Joel and Ellie the whole time. You can move away from them for a little bit and come back, so when you see these worlds kind of collide eventually, you're familiar with all of their stories, right? Shay.
I wanted to quickly touch on Sarah here for a minute too, because obviously, while she may not be in the game and the show for a long period of time, Nico Parker kind of coming in, who I haven't really seen since Dumbo, I would say. So to me, still a little child, still kind of looks like her mom. She's grown up, and not only that, but she does such a great job. When you look at Hannah Hayes, who played the character in the first one, had a very nice Southern accent, really kind of like, I'm daddy's girl. And then now you have Nico Parker here.
Are you sure you didn't voice her in the game?
I don't want to take full credit, but that was actually me.
I just want to make sure.
I sell drugs, hardcore drugs.
Hardcore drugs.
But, Nico Parker came in and absolutely killed it. I mean, she's so good, and we get to spend more time with her. We actually get to go see her repair this watch, this whole sequence that really just in the game, that's how it starts for us. And, of course, the events that take place during her time on the show is just phenomenal. I think she brought so much humanity to that character and really made me love Sarah even more. Like this, just knowing how much more was involved with her character, it really hit me.
Yeah, I think Sarah, getting to see more of Sarah was fantastic. Getting to see more Tommy. Tommy's one of my favorite characters in The Last of Us, so I'm really excited to see more of him over the series and in future seasons to come, because there's so much story to tell there, and they're having an amazing opportunity to tell it. I want to pose a question to the group as we get kind of closer to our final recommendations for the show. For the last couple of years, Anthony, I know you're the one who's, I think kind of coined this phrase on their show where, video games are very much the succession of what movies are, right? Especially what we're seeing now with performance capture. You could watch The Last of Us, a playthrough of it, all the cutscenes. That is cinematic. That is beautiful. That is a movie there that's like 7-8 hours long. And now we're kind of bringing it back to the live action. When you're going into the show, and it's the same way we look at like live action remakes of animated films, what are you looking for? Are you looking for something that's true to the source or something new?
It's a good question, Daniel. It is, you don't want something so true to the source, because what's the difference, right? Like, why would I want to watch the series? But this series, it's so adapted so well. The actors, the people who are part of it, it embraces it in a different way where they really took their time with making this series. Like, even though this is something I played about 10 times in the past 5 years, we'll say, because I was really late to The Last of Us. I love the series, and I think it joins the video game, and it accompanies this world that they created. There are new things that I am super excited about to just learn from the series that our audience will learn, especially if you're a fan of The Last of Us. And there are things that are going to be open for a whole bunch of newcomers, which is essentially what we want. We want more people to embrace this world, to embrace The Last of Us and enjoy and cry and feel the story that we felt playing the game, which they'll never do because they'll never own a console. There are people who, they don't play video games. There are people my age, they just don't play video games, but they'll probably watch this.
It's true.
They're just like, Game of Thrones, in which a whole world of people were just brought into this fantasy world, which you would never have expected. Never. Like, I was talking to people like, you watch Game of Thrones? Yeah, I do. And she has like her Chanel purse, and like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't comprehend, like, these are people who would never watch this, but this world that we're going to kind of dive into in the next couple of months, there's going to bring a new audience, and they're going to love it. And I don't want it to be so new that it washed everything away that we've experienced, because then it'll just be like, what the hell? Like, where does this fit in? But it's fresh.
These aren't the characters that I know.
Yeah, it's fresh.
Right.
They add new things. There are really great stories that I love more in this series than I did in the game. And yeah, I can't wait to see what the second season brings.
Excellent. How about for Brad and Shay? I want both of your opinions as well. Brad, I'm going to get you to start us off, then I'll go to Shay.
Yeah, I think it depends. For me, again, going into this, I didn't necessarily think that I wanted a more straight adaptation, but being won over, I think again the key reason for that is just if you're going to do a straight adaptation like this, for the most part, it's a straight adaptation, right? You need the original creators. I think that's what'll get me on board. Like, I don't want to see something that I wouldn't want to see this if Neil wasn't involved. Really, like I wouldn't have even bothered. I don't think, to be honest, and it would not have been what it is without him and Naughty Dog being obviously so involved with it. But at the same time, I really do like when there are things like Arcane or Cyberpunk Edge Runners, which kind of flesh out the world in really cool ways where you know you don't have to have played the original game. You need to know anything about it. If anything, it enhances your appreciation for that world and that universe. But yeah, I like that we're getting two types of adaptations like that. Like, not everything. It's not a box that everything needs to fit into. You can get all different kinds of adaptations, and then it gets me excited for you even briefly brought up like the God of War thing that Amazon is doing. After seeing the foundation that was set by this show, like, what are they going to take inspiration from, and on a more like philosophical idea of adapting something, right? Like, the sort of inspiration they'll take from that. How involved will Sony Santa Monica be, and then so that kind of thing is,
Definitely.
I think it's
And
really
Shahbaz, how
gets
about
me
yourself?
really excited.
Really quickly though, I do want to plug Brad's God of War article that he wrote about Christopher Judge and dealing with his own father, because that was a beautiful
thank
piece.
you.
It moved me to tears, and I absolutely loved it. Why did I sound like Trump there? I'm like, you beautiful peer, moved me to tears.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely
Most
fantastic.
beautiful, the best article I've ever read.
Listen,
I've written
we've
better
plugged
articles.
Brad enough in this review, by the way. We've given
Thank
Brad
you.
enough spotlight.
Yeah, we'll
He's never
remove
coming on
everything
the
from the
show again.
comments. That's fine.
Thank you so much.
But
I appreciate
it's an interesting question you pose there, Daniel, because there's so many times I think people kind of want to go in and they want a Gus Van Sant Psycho remake, and then when they finally get it, they're like, "Oh my god, I was absolutely wrong. What the hell did they do? They ruined it." And I think I like what they've done here with The Last of Us, where they've stayed on the same path, but they've given us different routes that they were allowed to take. We're allowed to express different areas and kind of get at a feeling of everything. And even if you look back at, was it 2 years ago now? My mind is messed up with the pandemic here, but when we got the Mortal Kombat movie, not a perfect film, but I do love that they stayed true to some of these characters, gave us a lot from this movie and gave us a lot from the games while still trying to do their own thing. Not everything worked, but in this scenario, I think it did, because we got what we wanted. We got what was familiar, but then we got a little bit more. So do I want shot for shot or anything? No, I definitely don't. But to Brad's point, as long as the creators, as long as the people that designed and made what it is are involved, then how can I be upset? In a few months, we're going to be seeing the Super Mario Bros. Movie coming out. And again, that seems like it's going to be going on its own path as well, because the creators are involved with it. We're not going to be getting what we got in the past, which we don't think we really talk about anymore. Am I cutting out? Is my mic cutting out? I can't tell.
I think you're losing. We're losing you. Shay. We're losing you.
So I want the adaptation, but I want it to be sincere.
Yeah, and Shay, you mentioned the paths, right? This show and the Last of Us video game series, they are on a path together. They are side by side. They may take different routes, but ultimately, we're getting to the same destination. And we're going to see that throughout the series. We're going to see it throughout the seasons to come. That, yeah, we're heading to the same place, but how we get there is going to be a little bit different. And that's okay, because this show is its own thing. This is not replacing the games. If you prefer the games will always be there. If you prefer the show is always here too. So, like, you have options. This is just creating an awareness of what The Last of Us is to make it a popular brand. Like we look at superhero films. Brad mentioned, how many people have played Batman? How many people have played Superman and Spider-Man? This is just really introducing the world to the stories that we're experiencing on the video game side, and it's bringing it to an audience that, like we've said a bunch of times in this review, not everyone is going to have a PS5. Not everyone's going to have a PS4 to experience these games, or PS3, because The Last of Us has now been on all of them. It's not going to be a series that a lot of people are going to experience that way. So let's give them what matters most from that game, is these characters, this story, and give it to them in a medium that they could just sit back, relax every Sunday night, and have an appointment viewing show. And this is what The Last of Us is, and it's an appointment viewing show that you could just kind of get lost in for an hour plus, whatever each episode is, right? So they're on the path together. Let's get to our final recommendations now. Of course, if you're new to the movie podcast, we like to we don't give a numbered score here. We'll either say, watch it, skip it, add it to the queue, real gem if it is an absolute incredible pinnacle of what we love here. But yeah, we don't like to give numbers to our stuff. Will that change one day? Probably not. But let's get things going off. Anthony, I'm going to get you to start us off with your final recommendation for The Last of Us HBO series.
It's a definite watch it. Put it on Crave, put it on HBO Max this Sunday, enjoy it, embrace it, and then watch the second episode the next week, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth, and the seventh, and the eighth, and the ninth. Is there how many episodes? I might be going over episodes.
9 episodes.
9 episodes.
You're good.
But yeah, I think this is going to be a fans will love it, and new people will love it. And yeah, it's gonna be cool. There's gonna be a lot of talk about it. I'm curious to see what fans don't like about it, especially once you get into the later episodes. But it's a superb adaptation, sure to keep everyone happy.
I love that. Shahbaz, how about yourself?
I'm right there with Anthony. This is a definite watch it. There's so much here that they've nailed right, and there's so much here that is just going to absolutely surprise you. What I think a lot of gamers will probably be happy about is they're able to now show The Last of Us, show something they love to people that didn't have the game, to people that didn't have access to the game. Like my mom, I'm never going to have her pick up a controller because I don't want to waste my time just getting past the menu. Make her play on grounded permadeath mode only. Permadeath, obviously. Yeah. No. And just to see how she feels about it is going to be very interesting. And then maybe one day I'll have her watch me play the game or something. But I mean, for now, to introduce this to more people is going to be the most interesting part of this, and it's the smartest move that PlayStation has done in a very long time.
I love it, Brad. I'm going to save you for last, so you get a little bit more time to think on your thoughts here. But The Last of Us on HBO, this is faithful to the game. This is an adaptation, but it's also an expansion on what makes the game so special. Pedro and Bella are fantastic in their roles, and just like when I was falling in love with the game, I am now falling in love with them, and it's amazing. They are Joel and Ellie to me just as much as Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker are, and I think that's what's really special. And I think if it keeps going the way it's going, we're really in for an incredible journey over the next 9 episodes. Brad, take it home.
I agree with everything you guys said. Absolutely, definitely watch it. I'll just add, try to go in not knowing anything about the game. I would say if you're a newcomer, there's a lot of twists and turns and nice surprises. One thing I think it does very well, and obviously I won't spoil it, is it does play with kind of zombie conventions in interesting ways. Sometimes where you might think something might go a certain way, or a character might do a certain thing because that's the quote unquote cliched thing to do, or that's what this character might have done in something else. That's not always the case here, especially with towards the later the end of the story. It's very interesting to see how people react to certain things, especially because obviously a lot of newcomers, their biggest point of reference is The Walking Dead. And what I like about this is it's very different from The Walking Dead, where I feel and I have a lot of fondness for that show, but I do think it went on too long and kind of meandered a lot of the time. But I feel this is the complete opposite, where it's very, even though some of the episodes get pretty long, it's very lean and focused, where it's about 2 characters. I mean, there's other characters and you kind of get their perspective a little bit, but it's fundamentally about these 2 characters, and it feels focused and it feels tight because of it. And that makes it feel different. So than The Walking Dead or any other kind of zombie story. So yeah, definitely go into it. I think try not to have any prior knowledge, and
I love it. Brad, thank you so much again for joining us on the movie podcast today. Where can our audience find you on socials, in real life? What's your blood type? Let us know all the details, please.
I am O negative, actually. I donate all the time, and they're always short on donations. So yeah, if you're eligible, please consider it. I'm on Twitter at Brad Shankar, BradShankar. Same thing on Instagram. I'm on MobileSyrup again, mobilesyrup.com, publish content every day. And yeah, thanks again so much, guys, for having me. This has been a blast. Always a pleasure to see you guys kill it. You gave me shout outs, so I gotta give you again. Like I said to you guys privately, but when I did that Last of Us junket, I legit went back and listened to episodes you guys have done, because you guys have spoken to so many famous people. It's actually it's legit inspiring. So always happy for you guys, the success you've had.
Thank
and
you.
Again, it's helped me out too. So
Thank you. That means
kudos to you, and thank you
that
for
means a
having
lot
me
to
on.
us. So again, we're honored to have you. So hopefully we'll be able to have you back again. I do also want to shout out our friends at Crave Canada who sent us the episodes to watch. So thank you to our friends at Crave for making this happen for us. Of course, if you want to watch The Last of Us, you definitely should catch it on Crave Canada starting January 15th at 9 p.m. This is appointment viewing. You don't want to miss it. Make sure you tune in for that. And of course, if you want to watch all of the incredible stuff that we're doing on the Movie Podcast, you could listen to us on all podcast feeds on YouTube. TheMoviePodcast.ca is another great spot to go. But of course, at The Movie Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Letterboxd is the place to go to find out everything that we have going on. We have some great interviews coming up for the rest of the month as well as some interviews. Next month, towards the end of this month, we are going to be at Sundance as well too. So look forward to all of our coverage from that. There is so much going on here. So thank you for joining us on the show. We want to start the year off as big as possible. And I think we're starting off in a really great way. So thank you again to Brad for your time today. Thank you to Shay, to Anthony. I'm going to thank myself as well too, because we'd like to have fun here. And that's what we do here on the Movie Podcast. So please follow us on our socials. That's the best place to go. And if you're on TikTok, I know you're on TikTok, go see what we have going on there. We have some really fun videos too. So you want to tune in for all of that and more. That was This Time with the Movie Podcast, and we'll see you next.